Excellent. So the second one is time management. So looking at time, we can actually measure time at three levels. We can look at a task level. We can then look at the grouping of tasks, which we call activities, and then we can look at the whole project schedule. This is where we start looking at the work breakdown structure. Remember that important work breakdown structure. So I'm going to start drawing it up here, and I'll get you to just take note of what we're writing up for each area, because this will be creating a template over the next 3 days. So the work breakdown structure, otherwise known as a WBS, or often referred to as the work plan. Now the first part of the work breakdown structure is we have a numbering system. So there's going to be a reference, and I'm going to put that as a 1.0. The second part of it is we actually have the activities or tasks. Now tasks are things that we do. They're the doing things, whereas activities are just groupings of tasks that allow us to better manage it. This will start making sense more in a moment. So if I just cross that across there. So for example, if we actually started writing a report, just use a report as a basic example because we all are typically writing reports in our projects, we would come along and say the activity is the report itself. Now the general rule in writing up a work breakdown structure is the activity is written as a noun or the name of a deliverable. So in this case it's the report. So we've already defined what the report is. Now it's actually explaining how we're going to create the report. Does that make sense? Okay, so there's the report. Then we come along and we start writing, so you can see the numbering system. 1.1 tells me it's associated with 1. So the first thing I might have to do is I'll research, and I'm just going to put research A. I don't know what A is, but we would have defined what the piece of research is, so for this sake I'm just going to say research A. We'll then come along and say what's the next task? Well, the next task is research whatever the thing is, B. Now you notice the tasks are written in verb. They're doing things, so we always want to write them in verb. Once we're doing the research, we might then start drafting the report. So you put draft report. Once you draft a report, what do you then typically do with it? Yep, you review it. Excellent. So we go 1.4, review the report. After you review the report, what do you typically do with it? Yep, you have to update it. Yep. So we'd update it after getting all the feedback back. So we update the report. Then once it's updated, what do we typically do with it? Excellent. Before we publish it, we would normally have it approved. Approved. 1.6, approved report, and then we would publish a report. Now you can see each of these, they're written in verb. Do you see that? Now, how do you know what level you go down to? Well, basically you go down to the level that the team understands what to do. So if I was building a house, for example, I wouldn't go down to the bricklayer and say mix cement, put this, etc., because they will tend to grab you in a headlock and beat the crap out of you. Yeah. So what you need to do is just say build wall, because they know what they need to do. So you go down to the level that the team understands. The other reasons you would go down to more detail is if you needed to get the accuracy more in it, or when you need to be more clear on who's doing it, because a different person's going to update it compared to a different person's going to approve it. Does that make sense? So the work breakdown structure is nothing more than steps out all the things we have to do, all the doing things. And the doing things are called tasks. We then come along and say, what is the effort? So if I look at effort, and for the sake of this, I'm going to just measure it in weeks. So if I go effort, I could come along and say that research A, I've worked out, or I've estimated it's going to take 2 weeks of effort. Research B is 1 week, and just for the sake of this exercise, I'm just going to say 1 week, 1 week, 1 week, 1 week, 1 week. So if you look at the total for this project, how long is it going to go for? 8 weeks. No one had to get out their iPhone, which is a good thing. Okay, 8 weeks. But is that the fastest it could be done? No. What do we need to consider? Excellent. Some of them can be run in parallel. if we have enough resources to do it. Because if you don't have enough resources, we're obviously going to be, if you're the one man or one person project, you're going to be actually doing it 8 weeks. But if you could be able to bring people in and do things in parallel, you could actually fast track it. So when we look at that, we have to look at something called dependencies. Now, who uses Microsoft Project? Does anyone use Microsoft? Okay, you would know it more as predecessors. It calls it predecessors. But these dependencies, effectively, is when we say which has to be done before this one. So if you ask me more about the research, and I said, no, they could be run in parallel, but they both have to be done before we draft the report. So for example, in here, we would have 1.1 and 1.2 have to be done before we can do this. Does everyone see that? That's the dependency. Now, do we have to finish drafting it before we can review it? Absolutely. So that would have to be a 1.3. Would we have to finish reviewing it before we can update it? Yes. We'd have to approve it before we update it. Update it before we approve it? Yes. And would we have to approve it before we publish it? Yes. So you can see that these would end up being 1.4, 1.5, 1.6. Is everyone with me there? So if I go over here, then and start drawing out the relationships there, you'll see this. 1.1 went for 2 weeks. 1.2 went for 1 week. They both had to be finished to go into 1.3, then 1.4, then 1.5, 1.6, and 1.7. How long, what's the minimum amount of time can this project go for if we had enough resources to run those two in parallel? 7 weeks, because we've effectively saved a week there, haven't we? What am I drawing up, by the way? There's a name for that, for the people that may know. Gantt chart. And in there we can determine what's known as a critical path. So what's a critical path? Well, see this one here. If I said that this starts on the 1st of July, and therefore there's the 7th of July in the middle, and that's the 14th of July. If I wanted to make sure it went for the minimum amount of time, and I started on the 1st of July, these would have to go one after the other. Would you agree? Right, so we call that to having a finish to start relationship. Finish to start relationship. But this one here had something, got a kind of gap. Does anyone know the name of the gap? Something that we can move. Starts with F. Float. Who's heard that term before? Float. Excellent. The older term used to call it slack, but I think you're not allowed to walk around your organisation now saying who's slacking off. Right? Different thing. So this float means that there's some time behind it. Now, the reason why we move float is if I started everything when it could start, I would usually need a heap of resources up front, and we don't get a heap of resources and then reduce the resources. So we might come along and say, Todd needs to start 2 days on here and then come over to this task. So I might start this task on day 3. Does that make sense? Because he can do those 2 days, then come down to this one. So the float, what I want you to write down, float's where we've got a bit of time play. Your aim is to, anything that has float, your aim is to leave as much at the end as possible. Why? Because if you took out that float at the end and the task was late, guess what you've just done to the project schedule? Pushed it out. So the term Richard was talking about earlier, he used the term critical path. And critical path is effectively the shortest amount of time the project can go where the relationship is finished to start and there is no float. The shortest amount of time where tasks are finished to start relationship where there's no float. Now the reason why critical path is so important, because here's the rule. Anything late on the critical path equals project late. So who wants to be a high-paid consultant? Anyone thinking about being a high-paid project management specialist consultant? A couple of us. Here's how it works. You turn up to the client site. They've actually indicated that they've got tasks late. You might find that this particular task is a week late. Now, usually if it's high-paid, you've got to look like you're an engineer or something like that. You've got to look like you're analysing it. So you analyse it, calculate, pull out calculator, make it look more authentic. Calculate, and then you look up and go, I've calculated that this project is at least a week late. Then you get your money and you get the hell out of there. No. in all seriousness, we use the critical path because we know automatically that if anything is late is on the critical path, the project is late. Why do you think we didn't want to leave no float there? Because as soon as you push it down there with no float, you've just put it on the critical path. If we started on the first day and it was 2 days late, is it actually going to impact our project's schedule? No. Does everyone understand that? So what we're trying to do is anytime we look at the first time we can start a task, any gap at the end of it, because this was 2 weeks long, this was only 1 week. So we had that concept of float at the end. What's the earliest date I could start 1.2? 1st of July. What other date could have I started it? 7th. But if I did it on the 7th, that meant that if it was late, it automatically is going to push all the other ones, because these two have to be done before we start this one. Which means if either of these are late, what's that going to do to the other ones? Make them late. So we want to try and keep anything with a float, we keep as much float at the back as possible, because if it's late, we can probably usually recover before it impacts the whole project. But if you're ever brought in and there's a project that's late, you ideally want to look at the critical path ones, because the critical path tells us where we need to focus. Now, you could have started this on the 1st of July, you could have started on the 7th of July. When else could have you started it? 2nd, 3rd, 4th, anywhere between. So if we come along to the dependencies and we put here the earliest start date, and then we have the latest finish date, and we put in here that we wanted to start this one on the 1st of July, so we might say 1st of July, and obviously whatever year you're working in, that's going to finish on the 14th of July. You might have realised that we want to keep that same person for 2 days on that first task and then move them to the second task. So we'll start this next one on the 3rd of July. Does everyone see that? The computer automatically knows that if it goes for a week, it's going to finish on the 10th of July. But here's the thing. So the computer automatically worked out that one, but it also can work out when the next one starts, because it knows that this one is dependent on those two being finished. So it automatically takes the latest date and comes down here. In fact, what it does is it then populates all of them. We don't even have to work out the date. Who thinks that's cool? The computer does it all for us. All we had to do is define what the effort was and the dependencies. Did everyone see that? Because as soon as we did that, and by the way, if this is going a little bit fast for you, this is just the review section overview, because we're going to go into this in a lot more detail. So you can see that the computer actually works out all the dates. All we have to do is focus on the task, don't we? And get this estimation of how long it takes, what the effort is, and the computer does the rest. Now the beautiful thing about this is sometimes you're told that the project's not going to start then, it's actually going to start in 3 months' time. So what you'd effectively then do is go and change this date, and guess what happens with the rest of it? Updates automatically. You can even go into the computer and say these are public holidays, or these are the dates I don't work, and it automatically then moves the schedule with all those in consideration. Who's had the situation where you got like a 9-month project? You go in there and the boss goes, this is great, you got 6 months. Has anyone had that experience? Yeah. Here's how you get around it, because if you don't have a work breakdown structure, very hard to get around it. Because what a work breakdown structure does is when I come into a project, and I'll use a real life example, and I'd put a lot of effort in this work breakdown structure. In fact, I was really learning the tool, so I was quite a little bit cocky. I thought I was getting pretty good at it. I almost felt like I wanted to frame it because it looked so good, but I walked in with the work breakdown structure, put it down, rolled it out, and there was the executives. I were looking at it and they said, Todd, you've really understood our business. This is exactly what I want. Great, this is fantastic. And it was a 9-month project. He said, this is fantastic. This is exactly what I want. You've got 6 months. And then I said this, oh, what do you want to lose? And he goes, what do you mean, what do I want to lose? Well, I said, well, at the end of the day, you can see it's a 9-month project, so what do you want to take out? Do you want, instead of having 3 reviews, do you want us to only have 1 review? Or instead of doing all this research, you only want to spend this much research. But then who's making the decision? The project sponsor. Here's the thing. You're a project manager. You're not a magician. You can't make more hours happen in the day, although we do try, don't we, guys and people rich? We do try and find more hours in the day. But when you look at it, there's only set time. So the project sponsor, having seen the work breakdown structure, then can make informed decisions. So then I said to the person, we can see that we could take that away. That would reduce the scope, but you'd save 3 weeks there, and you do this, you do that. And they then decided, and they got it down to 7 months. But do you reckon that's a better strategy than saying yes and then trying to deliver it on 6 months and not get the quality? So who makes the decision? Well, it's the project sponsor. The project manager is just the person that oversees it all getting delivered. But if we don't manage their expectations, a client, if you're working for a client, they will always want it faster, better quality and cheaper. This is how we plan it out at a level good enough to be able to sit down and have informed decisions. Because if they want 6 months, would I mind as a project manager having 6 months? No, I just work for them. But I want to make sure I can do whatever they're saying that they need done within that 6 month period. Does that make sense? We would then adjust the scope based on what they want on the period of time they want. So in summary, time can be measured at task level. Now if you do it at task level, it automatically adds up to the activity level. Let's have a look at it, because how does the computer work out what's the dates for the activity? Automatically takes the earliest date, and it takes whatever the last date is, populates it up there. It automatically can tell you how long that report's going to take to write. All we had to do is calculate the task level. The computer then grabs the start date on any activity and the end date on any activity, and then that says, here is your project's schedule. So really, where do we want to focus? Task level. Because if you don't do this, see, sometimes, which I'll teach you later, we do a high level. We go like this. I reckon that report's going to take 8 weeks. And that's okay for the first phase of a project where we're coming up with indicative costs, an indicative schedule. That actually has a name for it. It's called expert judgment. It is appropriate to go to a person and say, can you estimate it? But here's the thing. If you want to get this right, when they estimate something, say they set it too high level. I said, how long is that report going to take? And they might say 8 weeks. I could ask this question, how did you work that out? And they're going to say, well, we're going to have to do some research. That's when you write it down, because if you don't know the industry, all you have to do is write down what they're saying they will be doing as part of that guess. When I did my PMP exam, Project Management Professional, it's a 4-hour, 200 question exam. In fact, the 200 questions are what's the most right, not just what's right, what's the most right. So when I went to this exam, there was an acronym in there I didn't know. So as soon as I came out, I went to the authority, Google, and it was WAG. What do you think WAG stood for? What's WAG stand for? Any idea? Because I'm sitting here in the exam going, wives and girlfriends was the only thing I could come up with. I couldn't get it fitting. Excellent. It's a wild ass guess. Great. One of the very few people that knows that. That was called a wild ass guess. And then I found out there was also a SWAG, which means scientific wild ass guess, which I think you needed to have a degree. But when you look at it, that's a WAG. Because if the person's guessing and they're not the expert, guess what? You're then going to be running a project based on flawed estimates. That's where we start getting unstuck. So we will be working through the 3 to 4 estimation techniques to show you how to do this. But if you're guessing it, that's called expert judgment, which is very subjective based on the expert you're picking. And by the way, if I went to one expert and I wanted to know if they were right or wrong, what could I do? I could go and ask another one. And if they're both on the same page, cool. But sometimes they're totally off the page. Like one says, I remember we got a quote for one gig years ago. One said 180,000, the other one said 20,000. Where was the issue? Well, the issue was how we wrote up the scope. Because one was interpreting it as this, one was interpreting it as this. So that's where there must have been some ambiguity. Would you agree? Excellent. So time then is basically us being able to then track and know when a person is starting something, when it has to be finished. Imagine then when we put your name at the end of this and you're involved in this project, you know exactly how much of effort you got to put into it, when you got to start it, and when you have to have it done by. Do you think that would be more clear for you to be involved in the project team? And can I then keep you more accountable because we've told you what exactly you're doing when. Make sense? So you can plan your world around that. Okay, who thinks this is pretty cool? Because when you look at it, it's less effort, because I just have to say, what are the key steps, which are called tasks? How long do they go for? And as you can see, once we put these dependencies in, the dates start automatically populating. So it's a lot easier than we first thought. Would that be true?